This is Arcata. I'm Ken Hamik. I'm on the Arcata Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. We at the Arcata Chamber of Commerce are breaking a lot of new ground here. We have to be as innovative and creative as our over 400 member companies. So here we are today with the inaugural Arcata Chamber podcast series, This is Arcata. The Chamber commits to our business community in our own simple mission. The Arcata Chamber of Commerce is a diverse, non-political member organization serving the Arcata Humboldt area that supports business entrepreneurship and innovation and builds a strong sense of community. We come to you today from the new internet recording studio of HumboldtHotAir.org, who have graciously created a space for us to talk about the special geography we inhabit: ancient redwoods, ocean views, 6 rivers, innovative cultures, one-of-a-kind creative events, and a community which is inventing the future from the foundation of our rich and diverse past. Special thanks to Joellen Clark-Peterson, Chamber Executive Director, Jody Marinowski, and Danielle Orr, who's part of the Humboldt Hot Air team. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce Charlie Jordan, one of our local business heroes and a remarkable human in any geography. As your host today, Ken Hamik, I'm a chamber member. I'm also a business partner of the Ganjery, a new dispensary that is opening this September 2019 in McKinleyville. I'm also one of the co-founders and on the board for Community Pride and Peace, which is a nonprofit serving the area as well. Charlie, welcome, and thank you for helping us kick off this new Arcata Chamber podcast series.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here, and this is fun, new, different. I'm excited that we're doing this, that the Chamber's doing this. This will be fun.
So just a little of your background. Kinetic Coffee was started by Charlie in 2003 as a fundraiser. Following Yakima's move to Oregon in 2005, Charlie and her husband, Mark Ritz, declined to move with the company, and instead, Charlie revamped her business into a for-profit company. Founded to bring money into the county and provide local jobs, Kinetic Coffee produces small batch artisanal coffee. It is 100% organic, selling locally and across the U.S. in bike and outdoor shops. Charlie, what drew you to Humboldt? You travel, you have an opportunity to visit so many amazing places. Why Arcata?
It's interesting. I didn't know it at the time. My former husband, who we lost, but my former husband and I wanted to come up here. He was going to go to Humboldt. We moved up sight unseen based on information from friends that had moved up here, and we wanted a different experience for a family. We wanted to start our family, and we didn't want to do that in the San Diego area. We had experienced the oil embargo. Yes, we're really old. I'm really old. And all the influx of folks from the east to the west. It was this wonderful little town that grew up truly overnight, it seemed. And we wanted a better experience for our kids, and Humboldt was here. And so that's what really drew us here. And I hated it. I thought it was the end of the earth, and wondering what in the world a city girl was doing up here. And by the time 2 years had passed, we had 2 little ones and had met a number of people in the community and basically found our way. And it was home. It just became home.
Yeah, my wife and I call it Humboldt now.
Home, yes,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And speaking of community, many people talk about this word community. What does that mean to you?
I'm very blessed and very grateful to have learned firsthand what community means. And I thought I knew what it meant when I was ended up becoming a single mom with 2 kids, no family, and developed a network of support up here that really was another family. It became part of my family. To me, that was community. The other piece that developed was many years later when I ended up losing my son, and the community just enveloped us with love and kindness and support. And that's something that you don't find everywhere else. And in between that, I have been fortunate to spend I've been fortunate through my career to spend quite a bit of time on the road in different places throughout the world, and some amazing places, beautiful, lots of culture, big cities, small towns. And every time when I've flown back into Arcata or driven back into Humboldt, I'm amazed at the uniqueness of our area, not just the beauty, but the people. We have a spirit, and you just don't find that. It's not a common thing. I don't know how to really describe it. It's a feeling.
Yeah, Humboldt really does have a unique history. Much of it has been around taking advantage of the many local resources we have here. Looking forward as a business leader, what resources do you think we have to make this area really thrive in the future?
I believe there's nothing as stasis. It's a second, and that's stasis. So either an entity is growing or it's decomposing. That's whatever entity, if it's a group of people, a partnership, a community. And so given that as a basis, we need to continue to have growth in opportunity, in folks coming in, and I'm not talking about massive growth or anything like that, but you do need to have an ability to maintain life. So I see a number of areas without hurting our environment in this gorgeous place that we could have prosperous businesses. There's a number of opportunities, and I don't want to get into the litany of we could do this, we could do that, and we're doing some of those things. Some of them are public, some of them are not. Some of them are we're working through, right? Can this feasibility? Is it a feasibility? Is it feasible? So we have to work through the feasibility study and do those chores, right, that you have to do. But that said, I don't see Humboldt as a place of lacking at all. I actually see that we have an abundance.
Yeah, we're kind of caretakers, really, of what we've inherited. And it seems to me that was a great answer. I think that a lot of people that do visit here, it takes them maybe a little bit to really understand what Humboldt really is.
I agree. When I was hiring folks, primarily for Yakima, because most of our folks came from outside the area, we needed certain skill sets. I would tell them, if you can last 2 years through 2 winters, and I'm talking real winters, not the wonderful weather we've had lately, and you have the ability to get out at least once every winter and come back, you probably will survive and embrace Humboldt. There's a certain personality that we attract.
Yeah, like T.S. Eliot once wrote, "We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all of our exploring will be arrive where we started and know the place for the first time." So when you leave Humboldt and you come back, how does it feel like home? When you describe Arcata and Humboldt to those who've never been, how would you characterize it in a sentence or a paragraph at most?
I think of several examples. I can recall literally being parked on a freeway in Los Angeles it was 8 lanes across in the morning on the way to the airport, having concluded business, flying into Arcata and driving south on 101. It was like rush hour. It should have been rush hour. It was like 5:30. And there was a car maybe a mile in front of me, and I don't think there was anybody behind me. And so there's that, right? There's that difference. The other piece is, you said we're stewards, like we're protectors. And that really hit me when my kids were in college, and I happened to ask my son. We were in the Trinities backpacking. He had come home, and that's our trip. And I said, "You don't bring a lot of your friends back. What's that about?" And he said, "Well, I'm really picky about who I invite up here." And I said, "And why is that?" And his response was, "I don't want to bring just anybody up here. I don't want them coming up and spoiling it," which was really interesting for me to hear how protective he was. And his sister, a similar conversation with her at another time, he parroted the similar feeling. And it made me stop to think, that we are protective of it. When I've spoken about Humboldt, I feel protective about it also. I definitely want people to come and visit and enjoy, and I share that with them. And I also share that if they wanted to move here, they should plan on investing in the community for it to really be a partnership and for it to really work. And some people get it and some people don't. They don't understand what that means.
When you were talking, and I was thinking of kind of the word self-selection. People kind of self-select. Do they really belong here as part of this community or not? And I think some people would say, yeah, it's not my cup of tea.
Right.
But there's others that maybe find a home where they really never had one before, maybe for the first time, even though you were born and raised someplace. You were from upstate New York.
Yes.
I'm from Omaha, Nebraska originally, and that was home. But I have a really different feeling about Humboldt than I did at any place I've ever lived in the world.
There's a belonging. If you're here and you're participating, you're in the community, there's a belonging. And I see it in this real small example every year when we have a fresh batch of students that come. We have rentals all over the town, right? And I live in Sunnybrae, so we have rentals up there. And it's interesting to see the driving habits, and they're pretty aggressive. Some of them just run stop signs. They're rude. Typically within the first 2 weeks, 4 weeks, you'll start to see the same vehicles, right? In your neighborhood, you see the same vehicles, and you see that they change their habits. And what's interesting about it is those are the same folks that you might be behind or in front of at the checkout at the local grocery store, right? And they notice that. And the person that's checking them out might be their neighbor or somebody that they see up at HSU. And I think we hold each other accountable to behave, for lack of another word, but to show kindness and be appropriate to one another. We need each other in those times when we're landlocked, and then you go to your neighbor and say, "Yeah, the shelves are bare at the store, and I could really use a cup of milk, because we haven't been able to get supplies." And that hasn't happened for a number of years. However, that is, I think, one of those ways that we have community, and we rely on each other, and we build belongingness. I think that's one little example of that happens every year.
Yeah. At Community Pride and Peace, the nonprofit, we always say there's a you and an I in community. And it really does get up close and personal, because there's really 130,000 people in Humboldt. And
Yes.
Humboldt geographically is maybe the size of a state like Connecticut.
Yes.
So you end up seeing people more often than maybe on that 8-lane freeway that you're stuck on in the middle of LA.
And you'll never see that person again. Good chance. But up here, that's not the case.
So we at the Chamber often ask, what do you love about Arcata? Could be a place, restaurant, bookstore, local shop, a service, an organization. What are the favorite hidden in plain sight things that you would only tell special visitors about?
I love the diversity. I love that you can come up here and within a half hour, you can be nowhere, right? You can be in the wilderness. You can be hiking on a mountain. I can actually walk out my front door and walk up to the Sunnybrae forest and within 15 minutes feel like I'm actually in the wilderness. I like to share those type of experiences with people. Every year we have a memorial run for Kevin in the Arcata Forest, which is our park. And we have people that come out, including his teammates, and they're amazed. They're like, wow, this is in the middle of your town. I go, yes. And they're like, it's not only gorgeous, but they're just awestruck. So those are the special things.
And disc golf.
And disc golf. Well, that's the other.
In the forest.
In the forest, right, exactly. And then you can walk pretty much anywhere to town. You can, get a wonderful craft beer or some locally made amazing wine. And there's the plaza is a jewel, an absolute jewel for us. And I love it when we have events on the plaza. I think that's amazing. The fact that we have HSU in our community is also a wonderful gift. It keeps us current. It keeps us connected to art and culture that we wouldn't have available to us otherwise. And I think those are all amazing gifts.
Yeah, I just went down to the Humboldt State University block party on Arcata Plaza here just recently, and the energy was just palpable of these young folks that are from wherever coming to do their school here. It was like an immediate comfort zone for people that were there. I mean, there was food and there was great music.
Wasn't there a zip line?
There was a zip line.
Yeah.
3 stories high down the street of Arcata Plaza. It was awesome. But it also just, you get a sense of our culture by how we embrace newcomers as well. The world around Arcata continues to swirl. In many ways, our challenge is how to best manage, protect, celebrate our local advantages now in order to realize any future opportunities. With global warming and changing economies, there will be unexpected migrations, coastal and economic impacts on the area. What can we do right now to strategically optimize our human and natural resources to better navigate this uncertainty, Charlie?
This is a question that I think about quite a bit, especially with the change in weather, and those of us that have been, those that are locals as well as those of us that are transplants that have been here for a number of years have felt the change in our weather and what it's doing to the environment locally for us. And I'm really happy that we're talking about sea level rise and those type of things and what we need to do to mitigate those. So there's real tactical things that we need to do. In addition to that, I think as a community, we need to be open to infill. In as much as we have all of this open land, we really don't have a lot of developed land or land that's developable. So having ourselves acknowledge and be open to infill, I think, is really important. I believe we're already seeing an influx of climate refugees coming here, whether it's to escape fire-prone areas or whether it's to escape the heat. There's a smart way to plan for that, and to be engaged, I think, is really important. We're an amazing community as far as having a voice and sharing that voice rather than being apathetic and quiet and then complaining. So I'm glad that we participate. I believe we need to continue to do that and do that more so and start now. I don't think it's too early to start looking at policies and procedures and how do we go about planning future growth, which is here today. And then how are we going to serve those folks? I love the fact that the marsh is our waste. Well, I call it the poop plant, but so, but it's wonderful. I love that. However, there's a capacity, and we need to just be aware and acknowledge, and then look at, well, how do we not only plan for growth, but how do we embrace that now without losing the marsh, right? do we expand the marsh? How do we do that? And are there competing needs for that area, for, the coastline of our bay? I think we need to start that now. And in some places, I feel like we're already late to do that. But the other thing I would say is our community is creative. There's in ingenuity and entrepreneurship. It seems to be part of that character that gravitates up here, and I would like us to take that and focus it in these areas. And I don't question that we will. I think it's a matter of are we aware enough that we have to start doing it now?
I'm really struck just by how much time people up here spend outdoors, walking, biking. We'll talk about that in a second. But they really do appreciate the environment that we live in. So I know that will be a very rich part of the conversation, a little worry about how do we protect it. But also there's a pretty significant brain trust up here. We mentioned HSU, CR, but also just there's folks that are just have ingenious, creative solutions to everyday problems, and we just seem to be able to figure our way into solutions that are rather unique. Oftentimes, when you mention the marsh in particular, I know that people as far away from China have even come to tour and visit and to learn the engineering behind the marsh. But also the birds love it. And the bay loves it, of course, which is one of our most important resources here locally as well.
Right. In the bad old days, right, when you moved here, you had to create your livelihood. And I don't know that it's changed much. I know we had a very strong fishing and timber industry for several decades, many generations. In the 70s and the 80s, that was really the start of the shift. What it did is it sparked, motivated a lot of this creativity, and the folks that came up here were first and foremost motivated to be here, and then secondly, how do I survive up here? And I think that's just the opposite for a lot of folks that are urban dwellers. Nothing wrong with that, but first and foremost, I think they gravitate to, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to make a living, and that's going to take me to this area. Okay, that's where I'm living. And so it's just the opposite. I think that plays in our favor, that we have people that first and foremost want to be here.
Dependent is the word that I would probably use for a lot of places that I've lived outside of Humboldt County, on technology, on your cars, on air conditioning and heat, just the things that, normal survival things that you need in a real urban environment. It's very rural here. And so it seems to me that ingenuity would be the word that I would use. Off the grid, we know a lot of the folks that off the 101 in particular, but even people in town, in a beautiful place like Arcata, they have their iPhones and they have their Androids, and they're connected, they're plugged in. There's some pretty high-tech folks up here. But on the other hand, we have a way of disconnecting from that connectedness that everyone seems to depend on outside of the area. Put the phone away, have a conversation, take a walk, ride the bike, go on a hike. I think that that's another part of how somebody who would come up here to visit might say, this is different than what I just left. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm fortunate that my daughter and her family are here, and fortunate that I get to spend time with grandchildren. And we have tech time limit with the kids. When we've visited with friends, family, cousins outside the area, first time my grandson said something about, is there something I can do to earn some tech time? The other kids were like, what? It was foreign to them. And he was like, yeah, let's get our bikes and, let's go ride. And that was also pretty foreign to them. And so I think there's definitely something to what you're saying as far as it's a different mindset. And I'm grateful for that as well, because you need that level of creativity. You need people that can think without Googling something. and at the same time, you're right, we're also very dependent on all of those technologies. However, I think that we have a fairly good balance. I'll say we have a fairly good balance. I see people all the time putting their phones away and not going into an anxiety, meltdown because they don't have their phone with them. And I appreciate that.
Yeah, I just did a tour recently with the Chamber Board of Humboldt State University's library. And normally you wouldn't think of a library. It's a place to go study. It's a quiet place and everything. But again, unique. Cyril, who's the head librarian there, I think just won with some of his staff like a national recognition for how they did a pause and they looked at how the people used the library. Where were they? What time of day? And then they revamped. Almost like anthropologists, they redid the library based on usage. And they also included some of those quiet areas that weren't just quiet because, you need to talk with people in the library. You're working on your computer, you're working on your research. But they also included bean bags, a biofeedback station, a place for people to even meditate and relax in the middle of a lot of the anxiety that you get with some of these high-level courses on the campus. So even the library seems to be a place of respite where you can kind of step outside of the being connected to everything and get disconnected for a little bit and achieve that balance that you just talked about.
We hear more and more, and there are studies that are coming out all the time about connectivity, and you just said it, two different types of connectivity. It's being connected all the time to the technology and having access to whatever. And then there's being connected to individuals. And it's quiet time, but it's not quiet. I mean, you're interacting, you're talking, you're going for a walk, a hike, a bike ride, or a paddle, you're active. It's connection. And I think that's also goes back to, it's a thread here that we're talking about why Arcata. There's a connection. There's a connection on a lot of different levels, a lot of different planes, and people. We are social beings. We need our tribes, and we're a tribe.
Every year, the Chamber has our annual award dinner, and we honored you a couple of years ago. And I think everyone listening to this podcast will understand now why Charlie Jordan was one of those leaders that we really appreciate because of all the things you give back to the community, but also just your business acumen. You've owned and managed, been on board of successful enterprises in Humboldt. We mentioned Kinetic Coffee, Humboldt Area Foundation, one of our most important nonprofit institutions here that takes care of a lot of people in some ways that would surprise a lot of people.
Amazing organization.
You do the Arcata Sunrise Rotary.
Another amazing organization.
Yakima Products you were involved with.
Awesome.
The city of Arcata and several other local businesses. What advice, Charlie, would you give to young leaders on your keys to success? I mean, what gets you up in the morning? How do you set your goals? What is your secret sauce?
Those are a lot of questions. The first thing that I do when I go into a company, I've been doing business development here in the last part of my career for the last 12, 15 years, and now doing consulting. And the first thing I do is shut up and listen. My mantra is first do no harm. There's reasons that things happen, and you can have a lot of experience, and you can have a lot of education. And the education's great. It's theory. You have to implement it. And when you implement it, it's situational dependent. Your experience is also situational dependent. And so the current situation you're in may or may not be similar to anything you know from your past. So the first thing I would tell, and I do tell folks as they're coming up through the ranks, is hopefully you'll always be humble enough to first listen and learn what your situation is, and ask why. And then take that into consideration before you start to, or in addition to everything else you know, but before you start making changes. Very important when you're making changes that impact people's lives.
Listening is kind of a lost art. We forgot to shut up sometimes.
I know. I can do it. Yeah.
And just observe. Because sometimes just by watching the flow of a thing, a business, you can get a better sense of what needs to be improved, where the efficiencies might lie. So yeah, there's a certain wisdom in that listening for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I love seeing people and businesses grow and do better. And when I say grow, I'm not necessarily saying becoming, huge, big corporations. I mean, you could stay really small and intimate but grow in your offer of, whether it's a service or a product or whatever it is. And personally, you can grow. I mean, I just love to see the shift and people's lives getting better. And if I have the ability to contribute towards that, that's very satisfying for me. That motivates me a lot.
Yeah, we commit to so many things in our lives, don't we? We have careers, community, as we've been talking about this a lot in this podcast, and family. We lost a vital contributor when your son Kevin left us way too soon. But his commitment and his energy still seem to remain through the annual event that you had mentioned. The example he left behind for us to follow. What do you want us to remember and carry on with his legacy to our community?
Kevin was, and I apologize if I get a little emotional, Kevin was a special kid from the time he was born. And I had opportunity this last weekend. I joined many folks on the plaza and walked to support suicide prevention, and had the opportunity to walk with a fellow Rotarian and one of Kevin's classmates. And we got to talk, and she shared some memories and going, in this one class and growing up with Kevin in her grade. And I was able to share some things with her that were relevant. And it was warm and wonderful and really positive. And we were, we got to laugh and enjoy his memory. And that is really special to me. And I'm really happy to hear that other people are able to do that. I love that truly a month does not go by when unsolicited somebody makes a comment to me in some form, some communicative form, verbal, written, whatever, about seeing Kevin's memorial sign on the highway and acknowledging a memory, and how that there were several people have mentioned, I was kind of wondering if that was going to be a sad thing or not, but it really is a positive thing, or it makes me happy. I get a smile because I remember this one time and da-da-da. And I love that. I really love that his memory is positive with, and people think about who he was and how he conducted himself and how he treated people. He really went out of his way in just who he was. He wanted people to feel good about themselves and most people, their experiences are that they do feel good about, their memory and being around him. And not that he wasn't a typical kid, but he was. However, remembering somebody in a small community that you knew, I mean, again, it's about connection, right? And these are people that knew him. And when you're in a class of 300 or 400 and you lose one person, you remember that person, that you're growing up with them.
It's a big impact.
It is, right. And it was also a big surprise to all of us, maybe more to some than others, that he decided to enlist. And this was after college, so he didn't go in as an officer. He specifically went in as an enlisted person because he wanted to be an operator. And it was important to him to do this. this is the kid that was always carrying the bug outside because they have a right to live. And that's the kid that most people knew, right? And he carried that into his military career. He wanted to be a Navy SEAL. He wanted to know what that was like for his father and his uncle. And he also he tested, he was a smart kid. He tested out, he could have done whatever job he wanted, and he became a medic. We joked, we said, oh, not only can you kill people, but you can keep them alive in the jungle with bamboo for 3 days. And, we would joke about that. But the reality was he really was scribbing in and to surgeries and that kind of stuff on the back at base and whatnot. He set up clinics for the local villagers, and he really, really loved that. And when we talked about that, his comment was, I really want to show people in the world that the United States is about something other than just brawn and force. It's not about just that. And when I share that conversation with people, the light comes on. They're like, oh yeah, that's the Kevin I know. And if everybody's got a story, if you knew Kevin, you've got a story. He's the common sense stuff that we would laugh about. He would stop and he would think about that and make people think sometimes, or sometimes be the butt of the joke because he didn't get it. But then they would, were protective of him. But how we make jabs at each other. So yes, as far as his legacy and in our community, I think that's the part of the community that I'm saying that embraces and holds. And I think we share those stories and those memories to support one another and
to remember.
Yeah.
Remembering is really important. Memory is a big part of community. The future, aspiration, what do we want to become? That's important. But memory and, the people that help create this special, unique community up here, and he was part of that. We honor him at the Visitor Center.
Yes.
Giantoli.
Yes.
I look at it every time I go in there.
Yeah.
I think of Kevin.
Yeah.
And you told me something that I'd never heard of before. Potentially, we might be able to hear a little bit of a score that he wrote and performed.
Yes. So Kevin was a music and math major, graduated at UC from UC Santa Cruz, and went on graduated from there with honors in composition. And it was the first time in the 30-year history of that department that they had given out honors. And in his senior recital, which I have a copy of and a CD of, he has a song called, I think it's called Kinetic Conundrum, which is a pretty fun little song, and I'll burn a copy, and if you like it, I'll get it to you. He was quite the accomplished musician, and I want to go back to one other thing about Kev, which I think is actually important for us to remember right now in our history. He was very thoughtful. If he didn't understand something or didn't know about it, he'd research it, and he wouldn't make a decision or have an opinion until he had more information. And I think that's really important, to base your decisions and your opinions upon facts. And Kevin could be very much leaning to the right, if I can use political terms, in his protection of the environment and his creativity. And he was also an amazing artist as well. He did the T-shirt art for Sunnybrae Middle School, Kinetic Sculpture for many years. I mean, I think it was the 3 that he was there, and then 1 or 2 after he went on to high school. There was that side of him, and then there was this other side where he was really about very logical and very, could be all about business, and took his work seriously and got stuff done. And that was all within one person. And I think about that as I look at how divisive we've become in our nation, and think, man, I wish people could have a little more understanding about the fact that there's all of those pieces within each of us. We just need to look and understand. And maybe we should all do a little more research and education and listen, right, before we open our mouths and say, this is how it should be. But his music is one of my favorites, and I'm absolutely so grateful that we have a CD of his music and a tape, because he was amazing classical guitarist, and he played at our wedding when Mark and I got married. It was wonderful. Yeah. So yes, I will totally get you that CD.
Today with Charlie Jordan here, we also are able to include from Kevin Ebbert a little music piece that he did for his graduation.
Right, from Santa Cruz.
As a banana slug.
Yes,
going out,
absolutely.
Called appropriately Kinetic Conundrum. We know a little bit about kinetics up here in Humboldt County.
Kevin was one of the youngest, if not the youngest, there were two of them, participants in the Kinetic sculpture race that were able to cross the bay when we were still crossing the bay. I know the fact that I allowed my 12-year-old to cross the bay on a kinetic sculpture that he and I don't know how many other kids and a couple of other adults helped build was amazing. But I was right there in a boat next to him. So
no wonder he became a Navy SEAL.
Yeah.
It kind of makes sense now.
Right.
So you're an avid outdoor enthusiast, speaking of. Rumor has it you've flown down 101 from Trinidad at a bike about 50 miles per hour,
Yeah.
passing some cars along the way. What are your favorite bike trails, hikes, the hush-hush areas that you like to explore in Humboldt?
I am so grateful that we can, I say that word a lot, but it's true. My husband is working just outside of Santa Cruz, and when I go down to visit, we'll jump on the bike, and whether it's the tandem or the singles, and go for a ride. And I'm happy that we can find some places where it's just not just totally overridden with traffic. That said, everything is traffic. And coming up here, it's wonderful to be able to go for a ride, whether it's on a road. And we have world-class single track trails here for mountain biking. It's an amazing thing. And again, I can ride my bike from my house to the trailhead or just down the street or wherever we down through the bottoms. When you can't do that, you just can't do that. When we're south, we have to pack up the bikes and go. I don't know that you can not have like a special experience on the bike, on a trail, whether it's Sunny Brae, whether it's the community forest, whether it's out Jacoby Creek. And I'm not going to encourage anybody to go on private land, but we have some amazing trails for mountain biking, and we have awesome, very safe road riding as well. That's the cycling part. And yes, my husband's favorite, one of his favorite stories is when we were first on a tandem, and I was very reluctant to get on a tandem because, oh my God, I'm giving up control, right? Because as the stoker, you don't get to steer, just the captain. And I'm never going to steer because he's twice my size, right? However, I've learned a couple of things. He was an excellent cyclist, and it was a lot of fun going down 101 from Trinidad and reaching those speeds on the tandem. Little tiny tires. You don't think about that. You just feel like you're flying. It's an amazing feeling. You feel like you're flying. And then I also learned that the stoker has a lot more power than you think. so that was fun. One of my favorite things about Humboldt is the water that we have available to us, whether it's a calm paddle in our bay or estuaries, or if you want to take off and, go east and hit the rivers and do some whitewater rafting. I love it. We would do that every year. That was one of the things that summertime, yeah, when are we going rafting? How many times are we going rafting? That kind of stuff. And that's just a few of the stuff, the things that I really enjoy doing. And I think my favorite is the one that I'm doing at the time. I'm sincere about that because I can't wipe the smile off my face.
It's really one of the most diverse areas in terms of nature to live. We have snow in the mountains.
Yeah.
We have rivers, 6. We've got, the biggest bathtub in the world, the Pacific Ocean, right out there. We've got really unique beaches where there are surfers up here. We have all these trails that are increasingly getting connected. So there's now long distances that people are going to be able to run and bike as we continue to develop those local pathways and resources in the future. Charlie Jordan, I really appreciate your time today on behalf of the Arcata Chamber of Commerce and you stopping by and having a conversation for our first inaugural podcast. This is Arcata.
Thank you so much, Ken. I was honored. Yeah, really appreciated sharing some thoughts and thank you so much for letting me share those thoughts and also talk a little bit about Kevin and my family and why Arcata.
And I'll end by saying thank you for being such an awesome leader in our community, but also community. Because if I needed to point to somebody and say, what is Humboldt? What is community? If you were around, I'd point at you.
Well, that's very sweet of you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.